ASMR Nation. Oh, my dog is whining because his brother just left to get groomed. Okay, this is going to be a gum chewing little true crime mashup. These are just short true crimes that are on the Facebook page titled True Crime. Simple as that. That's the source. True Crime on Facebook. So it's just little snippets of true crime and a picture. So we have this first one. When Minnesota police responded to noise complaints after 58-year-old Dwayne Johnson, Dwayne the Rock Johnson, no, a different Dwayne Johnson, threw a fueled death party for his ailing wife. They found her corpse wrapped in the sheet at the top of the stairs, surrounded by 47 guns. Deborah Lynn Johnson's final wishes included rocking out, it's in quotes, rocking out to quiet riots, mental health, smoking, and having S.E. with her 58-year-old husband, Dwayne. Now, Dwayne's only 58, but well, he smoked a lot of chemicals. So this is Dwayne Johnson. Looks happy. Okay. Now we have one about, here it says, on December 23rd, 1944, First Lieutenant John Robert Fox volunteered to set up an observational post in the small Italian town of Soma Colonia, which was being overrun by soldiers, a member of the Black Infantry Division of the U.S. Army, to see combat during World War II. 29-year-old Fox had never before been on the front lines, but for 3 days he stayed at his post and directed artillery fire toward German positions to help countless Americans retreat. Then, on the day after Christmas, the Germans launched an all-out assault, and Fox quickly became vastly outnumbered while running out of ammunition. Surrounded and facing certain death, Fox called in one last artillery strike on his own position. He knew that he would die, but he'd also take out dozens of Nazis with him and allow the rest of his comrades to escape. According to the soldier that received his order, his last words were, "Fire it. There's more of them than there are of us. Give 'em hell." When his body was discovered a week later, he was surrounded by the corpses of approximately 100 German soldiers. And this is Lieutenant John Fox. Okay. Now we have one about Tupac, and if you don't know, Hulu is doing a special, it might be out already, on Tupac's mother. Okay. In 1979, Tupac's godmother escaped prison, where she was serving a life sentence for shooting a state trooper, and has been at large ever since. Living in political exile in Cuba, Tupac Shakur made headlines throughout the early 70s as a member of the militant Black Liberation Army. But when a traffic stop in 1973 turned fatal, Shakur found herself charged with a murder she maintained she did not commit. She broke out of a maximum security prison in New Jersey 6 years later. I did not know that. Maybe that's in the documentary. I forgot to do housekeeping, so we'll take a real quick break and do my housekeeping. If you are new here, welcome to my nonsense. If you are old here, welcome back. Oh, geez. If you're new here, please consider hitting subscribe. If you're old here, double check to make sure you are subscribed. Hit the like if you like. Leave a comment. It can be anything from a few emojis to hello to anything about this video. Hit the notification bell, and as always, I will link my tip jars in the description box. No pressure whatsoever, but any contribution is much appreciated. Okay. Now this one is Whitney Houston. By the time Whitney Houston was 40, her voice had been decimated by decades of drug and alcohol abuse, and she had to wear dentures to hide her missing teeth. Less than 2 decades earlier, she was the wholesome sweetheart of pop music. But once she married Bobby Brown in 1992, she began abusing so heavily that she could forget about singing for weeks on end. Once telling Oprah that the pair would spend days smoking coke-laced joints, watching TV, and never speaking a word to each other. By 2000, her behavior became increasingly unpredictable. Houston was constantly late to performances and often canceled at the last minute. And by the time the National Enquirer published a photo of her drug-covered bathroom in 2006, a photo Kanye West would later buy for $85,000 to use as a cover art for a Pusha T album. Bizarre. It had been 10 years since she had a hit album. But then in 2007, she divorced Bobby Brown and tried to turn her career around. She started touring again and entered rehab several times to stay sober. She even told friends that she started swimming to build back her lungs after decades of smoking. And in 2012, she booked a comeback performance at the Grammy Awards. Tragically, Houston drowned the day before the ceremony in a foot of water in the bathtub of her hotel room at the Beverly Hilton. So here's her and Bobby, and I hate when they show stuff like this. Like, yeah, like, I hate for her to be remembered like that, but, you know, I watched or read Bobby talk about Whitney's, like, Bobby. I also read Superhead, and Superhead dated Bobby. I think that Bobby's pretty transparent about his stuff. I'm not saying he's a good dude, I'm just saying he's pretty transparent that he's not, which I can kind of respect. And he said that, like, yeah, he was interested in Whitney, he courted Whitney. He goes, but you have to understand, there were other types of men courting Whitney. Like, I wasn't Whitney's only prospect. Whitney made it clear that this was the life that she wanted. Like, she picked me over very good men. And I didn't force her to do anything. We just lived this lifestyle. So, I don't know. I mean, if she liked to party, Bobby doesn't get all the blame for that, you know? Even if he partied harder, like, unless he forced or coerced, you know, we do dumb stuff when we're with people. So I don't think that she was just doing it to appease Bobby. I think she liked to party. Okay, and that's, like, I'm in recovery, but nobody is responsible for my addictions. You know, there's childhood trauma. That would be, like, the only thing I can think of that where some responsibility is there. But if you're not, like, telling anybody you should try this, you need to try this, like, then it's not on them, you know? And some of it was inevitable. Like, you were already an addict, it just wasn't showing yet until you went balls to the wall. Either way, it's awful, and sad. Okay. On February 2nd, 2013, American sniper Chris Kyle and his friend Chad Littlefield were shot dead at a Texas shooting range by Eddie Ray Routh. Like Kyle, Routh was a veteran of the Iraq War and was living with post-traumatic stress disorder that was so destabilizing that his mother reached out to Kyle for help. Kyle agreed to become the young veteran's mentor, and for their first meeting, decided to take him to a local gun range for his first meeting. But on the way there, Kyle and Littlefield realized just how troubled Routh was. This dude is straight up nuts, Kyle texted Littlefield as they drove in silence. He's right behind me. Littlefield responded, watch my six. Moments after pulling into the range, Routh grabbed 2 of Kyle's pistols and fired 13 bullets into both men, killing them instantly. So that's the American Sniper. He was portrayed in a movie, I think, by Bradley Cooper. But I remember after the movie came out, a lot of other stuff about this gentleman came out that was a little disturbing. And I can't remember what it was. But you could look it up, I'm sure. Okay. When 16-year-old Emma Walker broke up with her 18-year-old boyfriend Riley Gall in October of 2016, her family noted that she was acting like herself again for the first time since their relationship began 2 years ago. The young couple's time together had been turbulent, with Gall exhibiting controlling tendencies and sending threatening messages to Walker whenever he was angry. Soon after the breakup, he began resorting to extreme measures to get Walker's attention. One night, not long after they split, he washed down a handful of pills with alcohol in a supposed sewer attempt. Then 3 weeks after the breakup, Walker began receiving strange messages and phone calls from an unknown number while at a friend's party. The mysterious person on the other end of the line told Walker that they had kidnapped Gall and would hurt him if she didn't follow their orders. When she went outside, she found only Gall himself lying in a ditch holding his head as if he had been beaten. Walker seemingly recognized the kidnapping was all a ploy for attention, and she told Gall to leave her alone. But 2 days later, while she was asleep in her bed, he crept outside of her room and shot her. And this is her. It's terrible. Like, if you've ever been in a relationship with an absolute nutcase, it's awful. It's awful. Like, I dated this guy that would message me pretending to be like his own relatives, like, oh, he got in a bike accident, like a motorcycle accident. None of it was true. It's like bizarre stuff. Okay. Alright. Before Tim Allen became a household name for grunting on Home Improvement, he was a low-level drug dealer, dumb enough to walk through an airport with a pound of cocaine. To avoid a life sentence, he ratted out his partners and went on to become the comedian you know today. Yuck. I hate the 70s. I do. It grosses me out. And that just screams 70s. Okay. On June 26th, Maggie Beach drove her 16-year-old daughter Molly to Commons Pond in Warren, Massachusetts, where she worked as a lifeguard. When they arrived, Maggie, M-A-G-I, became concerned about a mustached man sitting in a white sedan and smoking cigarettes, who seemingly had no reason to be there. Just to be safe, Maggie walked Molly down to the pond where there were other people. But when Mother returned to her car, the man was still there. The mysterious man returned Maggie's stare, but he didn't say or do anything. The next day, the Beaches returned to the pond, and Maggie was relieved to see that the man wasn't loitering around her daughter's workplace again. But a truck driver told her that he had seen the same man earlier and that he also found his behavior unusual. That still unidentified man is believed to have been responsible for the tragedy that happened next. Soon after Molly Beach went down to the pond this time, she was abducted and murdered, and her remains would be found in the nearby woods 3 years later. To this day, the unidentified mustached man remains the prime suspect in her kidnap and murder. But after more than 20 years of investigating the case, authorities are still no closer to knowing his identity or what happened to the 16-year-old girl before her horrific death. I do remember hearing about that. I think I heard it on a podcast. Maybe Crime Junkies or something. Okay. Anti-activists spent years trying to shut down George Tiller's clinic, which was one of the only places in the nation that provided late term, until one extremist murdered him while he was at church in 2009. After more than 40 years of medical practice, Dr. Tiller had a national reputation. He was the director of just 3 clinics in the United States that provided women with late-term abortions, and he had become the target of pro-life activists. For decades, those people who disagreed with procedures his practice provided tried to have his clinic closed. Eventually, some protesters resorted to violence in order to fulfill that goal. Tiller survived at least 2 attacks on his life before the anti-abortion extremists murdered him in cold blood. Okay, let's do 1 or 2 more. After a botched circumcision in infancy left David Reimers severely injured, his parts severely injured, his parents decided to raise him as a girl instead. He was renamed Brenda and underwent reassignment surgery and was given estrogen pills to feminize his body. But Reimer grew up with severe gender dysphoria and depression. And he was finally told the truth at age 14. He immediately began to transition back into a male body. That's really sad. How can you mess up a circumcision that bad? Like, how? How? No. Unacceptable. To the point you have to remove everything? Okay, let's do one more. On June 30th, Stephen McDaniel of Macon, Georgia, was interviewed on camera by a local news station about the mysterious disappearance of his neighbor Lauren Giddings. But McDaniel was harboring a gruesome secret. He'd killed and dismembered her 4 days before. Speaking as if he were merely a concerned friend, McDaniel told reporters he had no idea what had happened to Giddings, even suggesting that perhaps she'd gone out running and someone snatched her. The interviewer mentioned that police had just found Giddings' body in the trash in the parking lot behind her apartment complex. Suddenly, McDaniel's demeanor completely changed as he realized he was probably about to get caught. In the early mornings of June 26, McDaniel entered Giddings' apartment using a master key and to death. The next night, he returned to dismember and toss her body parts into various trash cans throughout the area. While police recovered Giddings' torso just before McDaniel spoke with reporters on that fateful day, they never found her arms, legs, or head. And that is her, and that is the creepy neighbor. All right. Well, that was interesting. Okay, if you are still there, thank you for watching to the end. I hope you have a good rest of your day, rest of your evening, or a good night's sleep.